thing I wanted to add to my comp was just to clean up this floor a little bit. And so there's some of this seam in here, if you look close, where we blended that shadow and the highlight originally in the very original picture. So what I did to like hack this is kind of I just covered this up basically by some puddles. And I wanted to add some reflections, actual reflections that are more clear, like as if there's some standing water in these areas. So all I did was I took the image and I flipped it over, and I place that position with the object that I'm trying to reflect. So for example, if I'm trying to reflect this little bike and object here, I'll take that and I'll just move my thing here. I'll move the image until I see that object in the right position in the reflection. So if it loads here, let's just switch a pre-comp so it'll speed up our comp here a little bit. Yeah, let's just see if we can do it. So if I move this, you'll see, okay, so you see how there's the reflection in the puddle, and I've just painted a little bit of a puddle with a roto shape. So I've just kind of drawn a little shape there, feathered it off, and reduced the opacity a little bit. So you just flip the image over and put it in the right spot where the reflection would be. So it's kind of just right there. So that's the correct spot. So for each reflection or each object, you need to do these independently. Because if you just flip the image, things aren't going to reflect into the right place by just flipping it over. You need to flip the object, and then you need to move the image down to the ground of wherever the object is. So essentially, like this pole, for example, I've created a layer here that reflects the pole. So it's just flipping the image and masking, key mixing that in. But I've moved the image into place to make sure we see the opposite side of that pole. So I just want to show you guys, if you just do a normal mirror, like if I just take this and actually, yeah, let's just do it this way. So if you just have the reformat and set to flip, that's one way of doing it, or you can do a mirror node. But if you don't move it down, and I'll just show you, if you just plug that in, you see that's not the correct reflection. So sometimes, depending on the object you're reflecting, you need to flip the image and then move it into position. So that's the easy way to do reflections. This is an alternative way, and it's more complicated, but it will solve your problem of having to manually flip and then move the image down to each area that you reflect. So this is a 3D way of doing it. This is a more advanced way. But what you can do is take your entire image and you project it onto the walls of the scene. So essentially what you do is you take the geometry that you already created, which is these two walls here. We have two walls, the cards for the walls and the ground. So we have the two walls, you plug it into the projection, and the ground plane, this piece of geometry, you plug it into a reflection node. So everything is plugged into the project 3D except for the ground plane. And I also placed a card on the back of the alleyway. So I've placed a third card just on the very back, like that. And what that will give you is actually a mirror reflection of our scene in a sort of 3D proper way. So if I enable and disable the reflective card, you'll see that it's actually reflecting, and each part, you know, instead of doing this 2D way where you have to transform it down for each object you want to reflect, if you do it the 3D way, it's going to give you the correct perspective of the scene, and it's going to reflect things the proper way. There are areas that are problematic. So if we look at areas like this, we see that sign, that doesn't make any sense. Like this corner seems correct the way it's reflecting, but this corner, it doesn't make sense. And that's because we didn't model this sign out. So if we put a card there, we could reflect it. So, you know, if, for example, I could try to do it real quick here. If I were to try to find that object, and if I put a card in the scene, and let's say I make this bigger. Okay, so if I go here and I try to find out where that sign is, let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so if I go there and I actually try to place this card in the right position, kind of how we did with our blue screen that we created, that curtain that we created earlier in this project. If I go in there and I try to find the right spot and place a card that's projecting it, you see that it actually fixes that reflection. So if I enable and disable, you see how it's actually mirroring it sort of properly. So, and maybe that's not even the right position of that card. So you'd have to go in there and you'd have to find the right spot if you want to reflect things in a super accurate way. So that's not exactly the right spot for the card, but you guys get the idea. You'd have to go in there and essentially do it that way. So hopefully that's useful. If you really want really accurate reflections, you need to essentially model out the whole scene. However, for this one, I just used this layer to mask in certain areas that looked good. So I just masked in a couple different areas with the roto paint, and I just painted across that seam that was not very good in our scene. So we see that seam, I've kind of just painted over it and put some reflective puddles and stuff like that over the top. And that's essentially how we can do reflections in a 3D manner and a 2D manner, depending on what you need. So, yep.